Is it your intention to take it all the way to the Supreme Court? And are you worried about the potential consequence if the court were to rule against you, overturn 90 years of precedent, and what that might mean for other commissioners at agencies or even, say, the Federal Reserve?
Thanks so much for having me. Yes, it is absolutely my intention to sue, as it is Commissioner Bedoya's. I want to be really clear, though. These firings were not legal, and therefore we do not believe that they were effective. I think it is important to go to court to vindicate that right, and much more than being worried about a bad decision from the Supreme Court, I am worried about the consequences of letting efforts like this stand and what that will mean for the enforcement of the law without fear or favor across the government.
You were fired via email, Commissioner. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Well, I would say
how does that
they
work?
Are attempting to, they're attempting to fire us via email. But
okay, I understand the spirit of your language. But what did that email say? And did you both get the same one?
I believe we both got the same one. It said that effective immediately, you are terminated.
You spoke with the FTC chair about this, Chair Ferguson. What's his thought?
We did not talk about his opinion on the matter. We just talked about the fact that it had happened and what next steps looked like from his perspective administratively.
Well, so when we consider his perspective or just his voice now at the FTC in the absence of you and your colleagues' voices, if it's him at the helm, not the Democratic commissioners, how will that actually change the way in which FTC business is done?
So that's the really important point here. It doesn't change what Chairman Ferguson can do. He is the chairman of the agency. The Republicans are in the majority, and we are in the minority. We can't control the actions of the agency, but we can add transparency and accountability, and that is really important for protecting integrity of the markets.
The statute governing the FTC says commissioners can only be removed for cause. Was there any indication that you were fired for cause, or that your attempted firing was for cause?
No, there was no claim of cause, and the statute actually specifically says cause means neglect, malfeasance, or inefficiency, and there was no claim of any of those on the part of Commissioner Bedoya or myself, just that the president had the right to fire us, and so he was doing it. And to be clear, that statute is over 100 years old, and only one time in history has a president attempted to remove an FTC commissioner over a policy disagreement. It was 90 years ago. President Roosevelt tried to remove Commissioner Humphrey. And in the face of the clear language of the statute, the Supreme Court said that was illegal, that the statute is constitutional, and that FTC commissioners and other commissioners of multi-member bipartisan agencies cannot be simply removed because the president doesn't agree with them.
Well, so as we talk about some of those other examples, keeping in mind we are having this discussion with you on the day we got a Fed rate decision, is this directly applicable to what is supposed to be an independent central bank? Is that one way in which market participants should be looking at this?
Yes, that's exactly right. And market participants should be scared. To be clear, there's no legal difference between Jerome Powell and me. In fact, he and I were both originally appointed by President Trump around the same time in early 2018. And if the president can illegally remove me, he can illegally remove Jerome Powell. And the market that depends on the independence of the Fed and monetary policy being set not to do favors to the president's political allies or fortunes, but to protect the integrity of the U.S. economy, people should be very worried about that.
Commissioner Slaughter, I'm trying to get to the bottom of the motivation here. The press secretary was asked about the timing today, as well as the reasoning. You were one of only 2 Democrats at the FTC. You were clearly not steering policy here. The chair was in charge of that. What does your removal change in terms of outcomes by this body?
It's a great question. It doesn't change what the chairman can do. It does change whether there is going to be transparency or accountability when he does it. So if you imagine, well, we believe in a system, our system is grounded on the idea that the law can be enforced without fear or favor. It is notable that of the collection of CEOs that flanked the president at his inauguration, the FTC is currently actively litigating against almost all of them, or all of their companies, I should say. And if you imagine that the president calls Chairman Ferguson up and says, drop this lawsuit or sue someone else because my political allies don't like them, there won't be anyone available to call that out and provide transparency and accountability. I'm going to apologize for the background noise. I am volunteering at my child's school, and so it gets a little bit chaotic here because families do not stop for political activity.
Well, we understand you are joining us both in your professional capacity and in your capacity as a mom, and we really appreciate you making the time. Just on that note, on the outstanding cases the FTC is pursuing, are there any specific that you fear might actually go away entirely, cannot be litigated to its end as a result of what has just taken place?
Yeah, well, I fear any of them being dismissed or settled for really insufficient remedies. I worry what happens in our merger enforcement program. But I think a really important case to pay attention to is the FTC's current active lawsuit against the pharmacy benefit managers over the price of insulin. That is a case in which Commissioner Bedoya and I are currently sitting as judges, and the other FTC commissioners are recused from that case. And so if Commissioner Bedoya and I are not there, I don't know what happens to that case. There is no precedent for this, but it is a really important issue that matters to millions of Americans, both those who depend on insulin and those who depend on other drugs whose prices have allegedly been raised by the work of the PBMs. And so I'm really worried about that case, among others.
Is this, Commissioner, the principle of winning your case, or do you really want to go back into this world? You could be at your child's school every day if you wanted to be.
That's true. This is not about me, and it's not about my job. This is about a really important principle of law enforcement without fear or favor. And to be clear, it's not even just about the FTC. It's about the SEC and the CFTC. We've already talked about the Fed. All of these agencies in which markets rely to provide stability and integrity are at risk of becoming political pawns if this decision is allowed to stand. So yes, I'm perfectly fine. I'm happy to spend time with my children, but I care much more about the principles at stake here.